Hi, my name is Max and I'm a second year English and Film Studies student. There was a lot to consider about choosing where I would be going for housing when I decided to go to university. I knew that I wanted something definitely cheap, and I also thought I'd want to go somewhere close, somewhere in Sussex as I already lived here. So, when I was deciding university, money was definitely the biggest priority for me, which is the main reason I decided to stay at home for the majority of my course. I felt that even though I wouldn't be able to have the experience of hanging out with roommates and living on my own, the amount of money I'd be able to save by staying at home, which ended up being thousands of pounds, was more than enough to outweigh the need of that. I also thought that because I was planning to go on a study abroad year, I would still have that experience of living on my own or living with roommates later on in life. And even if that study year abroad didn't go through, I'd still think, okay, I can maybe do this when I want to do a master's and have a scholarship to back me up with the monetary struggles. In general, I have saved so much money from staying at home, and it's a lot easier. You end up being able to rely a lot on your parents, and even if you do still have to pay rent to them, which a lot of the time you will need to, even if just out of respect, it's always so much cheaper than where it would be at a normal student accommodation level, even in private accommodation. It just saves you so much money. But there are a lot of considerations you would need to do. You would miss out on the roommate situation, which you can make up for if you go to societies at your university and meet people there, or if you mingle with people in your classes. But it does make it a little bit harder to find these kinds of people and build those relationships. You do have to go out of your way to get to them. Whereas sometimes you are just put into relationships straight away if you stay at university accommodation. And accommodation at university is generally very nice. The conditions there are great, and I have seen different housing, and I did have a look at that kind of thing when I was planning to go to university. So it can be worth the money, but if you do want to save some money, I think staying at home, and if you are around the same area as the university, staying at home can save you so much money. There is another facet to it, though, of course, is if you do need to transport to university, there are a bunch of different considerations you'd need to make there. A lot of the time, relying on public transport can be a little finicky. You will have to do this in your second year and upwards anyway. If you end up living in a city, you'd have to figure out how to do your bus routes and train routes. But it is something you have to consider in first year as well if you decide to stay at home. And that can rack up some costs, especially if you're not that close. There's also considerations of what I decided to do, which was to drive my car to university, but it was quite hard to find a parking permit that would fit me. In the end, I was able to get a very, very reasonable price parking permit for the university parking places because I was so far away from the university that even though I can drive to the university in 15 minutes, if I took the train, it would take me an hour and a half. That's just where I am. It's so hard to. It would be like a 20-minute walk to the train station, and then the 40-minute train there, and then the walk to and from lectures. It just made sense. So if you drove the car, because I'm right opposite a dual carriageway, I can just go straight there and straight back, and as long as my lessons don't end at rush hour, which is another very important consideration, always plan your timetables so that you never have to leave at rush hour. And if you do go to a society that day, there is nothing worse than having to sit in traffic for an extra 40 minutes just because you left at the wrong time. And that is probably the worst part about staying at home. But if you do schedule around it, and maybe if you talk to your tutors about it and say, hey, can I please move this seminar to a time that isn't ending at 5 p.m. And sometimes they will understand that, and they will say, okay, there's another group here. But if not, then you'll have to find another way of spending that time, because I definitely don't think if you're planning on driving to university that you should leave at rush hour at any point, because it's not fun. In general, housing is quite a big decision when you're going to university, so I do think you should think about it very heavily. But if you want to save some money, and if you want a very easy experience that generally doesn't have that many problems, I do recommend staying at home if you can.